We're here today in Paris to interview Vanessa Nurock. She's one of the young scholars who's very interesting in the French discourse of ethics of care, and I've prepared some questions for her. And we're gonna start with my first question. It's in your book Carol Gilligan, Et l'éthique du care from 2010. You make a plea that we speak of a plural ethics and politics of care instead of only Carol Gilligan's ethics of care. Can you elaborate on this subject?
Sure. Okay, so this was Carol Gilligan, Et l'éthique du care is an edited book, and what I wanted to say, because the book was on Carol Gilligan, was not necessarily that we should not rely only on her work, because this was about her work, but what I meant is that I thought it was very important to have different voices, as she says. So I guess that this has to do with what she means anyway and what she thinks that we should do, and so that we should have different points of view about the ethics of care. And as we do have in France, usually we don't agree, we have a lot of discussions. And also what I wanted to say is that I don't think that the care lens is the only relevant one. Before this book, I wrote a book about John Rawls and the theory of justice, and in my own work I rely both on the ethics and politics of care and on the theory of justice. And so I don't think they are alternative, but I rather think that what the ethics of care tells us is that we need to hear the different voices. So we need to hear the voices which are not the dominant one, as the theory of justice used to be, but we shouldn't make the ethics of care a dominant view either.
Okay, thank you. My second question is your book Sommes-nous naturellement moraux? In English you could translate it, Are we naturally moral beings? It's from 2011. It's a thesis on morality, and you use as a methodology moral philosophy and empirical science. Could you elaborate on the plea in your thesis, specifically on the diversion of a sense of justice and a sense of care?
Yes, sure. Okay, so this book, Sommes-nous naturellement moraux, is about the moral sense. And what I wanted to do, amongst other things in this book, was to take seriously two main ideas when I speak about the ethics of justice and the ethics of care. First, it was to take a view from Carol Gilligan. She usually says that the ethics and politics of care are completely compatible with cognitive science, and she frequently quotes Antonio Damasio, among others. And so I wanted to see if the ethics of care could have something to do with cognitive science. The second view is a view from within cognitive science, and this view suggests that we are born equipped with moral core knowledge. This moral core knowledge would be very early developed, and they would be the building blocks to develop later other cognitive capacities. So I try to put this into morality and to rely also on Jonathan Haidt's view that we could have several core of morality. So my view is that morality is at least a two-level cognitive capacity, that the first level is a naive capacity, which is very intuitive and very appears very early in development. The second level is more reflexive, and it takes as input outputs from the first level and also other cognitive capacities to give more reflexive judgment. So in this book, part of the book, the end of the book, focuses on this naive morality, and I try to explore how it could be composed from a cognitive point of view. My suggestion is that it is composed by at least two core knowledge. One core knowledge which I call which I call some kind of sense of justice, and the other core knowledge would be a sense of care. And my idea is that so they would treat different information and suggest different reactions. I cannot really give a thorough description of that, but my idea is that depending on your personal choices and also depending on the culture you live in, you can develop these two cores, or you can overdevelop one of these core and underdevelop another core, for instance. And I suggest that there are probably more than these two cores, as Jonathan Haidt suggests too, but he doesn't speak about care, unfortunately. And I think that it could be interesting for us to try to go on with this cognitive hypothesis, because then this could be a way to understand why care is underdeveloped in our societies. When we live in a justice culture, then since a very young age we would develop our justice core and underdevelop our care core. And so this is also one reason why I think that we should develop the culture of care in our society, so that since a very early age, from a cognitive point of view, we would be able to develop this care core, which is part of our natural, so to speak, equipment.
Thank you. Well, then I go to my last question, and it's about your current work. I understood it's about technologies and the ethics of care. Could you tell us more about it?
Sure. So this is really a work in progress, and I hope to finish a book, I hope this summer, about it. So my aim is to propose an analysis of new technologies such as nanotechnologies, genetics, and artificial intelligence through different ethical lens, including, as you may guess, the lens of care. So my suggestion is that care ethics has not been used in the current research to understand new technologies from an ethical and political point of view. And I think that this is very needed, because I have the very strong feeling that our current frameworks don't work when we try to think ethically about these new technologies. And one thing that I think could help us, for instance, would be to develop the concept of relational responsibility. I will give you two examples. In nanotechnologies, I don't know if you've seen this, but there are some socks with silver nanoparticles, so they're supposed to be less smelly, than the other ones. Why? Because nanoparticles of silver nanoparticle, have some kind of antibacterial properties, which would be used to kill the bad bacteria in the very early stage, and so your socks wouldn't be smelly. So when these socks are dirty, even if they're not smelly, you have to put it in the washing machine. If you put them in the washing machine, then the nanoparticles of the silver nanoparticles would get into the water, and from the water get into the environment. And this is really a very big concern, because they are so small that we cannot stop them. And we don't know where they're going. They will be ingested even by very small living or non-living actually entities. And so this is the main concern. And the issue is, who is responsible for that? Is the nanoscientist who designed these particles responsible? Is it the factory or the brand who made the socks? Is it the washing machine company, which doesn't have the good filters, which didn't design the right filters to stop this particle? Is it you who bought these socks and they are not smelly, so why do you wash them? So I think that each of these entities, each of these agents have a share of responsibility, and that it is the relation between this responsibility that should be explored, and not a causal issue that should be explored here. So I think this could help us to think about nanotechnologies and ethics, what we call nanoethics. Let me give another example now from the field of genetics. let's say that you did send a sample of your saliva, for instance, to a direct-to-consumer genetic test company. And so what you do when you send this sample is that you don't provide them only genetic information about yourself, but also about your relatives. And recently, the FBI has used actually this information to solve crime and arrest relatives of people who sent them their genetic data. So I think this is an issue because it could also be used for different purposes than solving crime. And this means that when I send a sample which could be used by a genetic company, this involves not only me but also my relatives, my living relatives, but also my dead or unborn, and I think this is important, relatives. So I give personal information about them. And so I have a relational responsibility toward these persons, toward these relatives. It's very funny because we don't have the same word in French, but it works better actually in English. And I think this is one of the reasons why care ethics could help us to understand better some of the issues which we are now very deeply involved in concerning these new technologies. And I could say a lot about artificial intelligence, but this will be for next year when I will have finished the book.
We'll hear about it here then. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for this interview.
Pleasure.
And,